I wish. I found out after I did all these tests, I found out we had one direct drive in our store, and my guy already sold it to someone, and I'm thinking, you turd.
Yeah. I wonder how it would match up. I don't know. I get your science and your pitch and your testing, but I don't know, man. It's hard to argue with water. Welcome back to another episode of Appliances Unboxed. Today's topic, we dive into washing machine. Personally, I love my trusty old school top load washer.
Your trusty top loader was great when it was built. Now, with changes in technology and changes in the regulatory environment, it really isn't the best option anymore to get the most performance out of your washer. You really should consider a front loader.
I've spent about the past 3 months and $6,000 buying a bunch of top and front loaders to see which one's better. I think one is definitely better than the other one, but it's a real interesting discussion.
So it's obvious that my top load direct drive washer is king. Changed my mind.
Well, Scott, your top loading direct drive washer is not king. It needs 40 gallons of water to not clean your clothes. Think through it. How much water does that thing actually use? You got a full drum on wash, full drum on rinse. It's great, right? It does such a good job cleaning. Yeah. You do realize that machine was designed at a time when phosphates were legal to put in detergent, that it didn't cost a fortune to heat water to wash clothes when you were using 40 gallons at a clip. And it was designed when people largely pre-treated and pre-soaked their laundry. How often do you pre-treat a stain or soak your laundry for 3 hours before you actually go through the process of washing it?
Well, it's kind of built into the cycles, right? That's the point of the washing machine.
That's the point of modern washing machines.
It's a bold statement.
Look, it's the truth, and Ben can back me up on this.
So really what it comes down to is the top load direct drive washing machine was the best washing machine ever made, but they haven't made them since 2011. What's followed since then has seen a nosedive, I think, in terms of quality, both like build quality, but what you're actually getting out of the machines. Even though I would say, oh, it'd be great to go buy a direct drive Whirlpool top loader, they just don't exist anymore. And what's come out on the market since then is not quite as good. Or you can go with a front loader, which is fancier and uses less resources, but there's no way around getting the clothes clean unless you use a ton of water or a ton of time. It's like driving from, let's say, Austin to Dallas, Texas. You can go 90 miles an hour and use a ton of gas, or you can go the speed limit, which is the speed limit in Texas 70?
Yeah, it's usually 70.
70, legally 70.
75, yeah.
Depending on the flow of traffic. But if you go slower in a car, it uses, you use less gas. You're going to arrive at the same destination. So the challenge is, do you want to do it the more efficient, slightly slower way or faster? To me, I just throw them in and just come back later when they're done. So I don't care about the time constraints, but for the interest of people discussing devil's advocate, some people do care about that, but there's a lot of caveats to the discussion to where you can have a good debate. But I do think, like Matt said, front loaders do come out better in the end for many reasons, but it's maybe not as clear cut as we always want to think it is, because there are some variable factors, and it also just depends on the brand of the machine, the capabilities of the machine, and what you're doing with the laundry. Like he said, pre-treating or not. Most people are not doing that.
So let's break this up in some categories here. Like what are the important categories in my mind are, number one is cleanliness. Does it clean my clothes? Number two, it would be water usage, electricity, and then durability. In that order, probably. Maybe durability is a little bit higher. but
So your first one was cleanliness. And, the whole point of every washing machine is just wash your dang clothes. And that is a huge debate that you have in the market, because some people will argue front loaders don't get your clothes as clean. From my testing, front loaders get the clothes clean better if you're willing to invest more time into the process of letting it run. If you're using a Speed Queen TC5 top loader, that machine's going to run between 34 and 40 minutes, and it's going to get the clothes reasonably clean in 35 to 40 minutes in most cases. It's going to use a ton of water, but it'll get your clothes pretty clean. If you take an FF7, a Speed Queen FF7, or an LG WM4000, it's going to take 55 minutes to maybe an hour and 15 minutes to run the same quote-unquote load of clothes, but it'll actually, from all my testing, it will come out with less stains. When I've done all my stain tests or my stain strips, they come out a little bit better, but if you were forcing it to run for 35 minutes, the top loader will win every time.
I mean, as far as my perspective's concerned, in just personal use, I grew up with front-loading laundry. When I moved into a different house and it came with a top loader, that thing was dead in a week because I couldn't stand the low performance from the machine since I was so used to how well front loaders clean clothes. That thing just went straight in the garbage. It worked fine, but I got rid of it. I couldn't stand that stains weren't coming out. It was just an aggravating experience, but that's from somebody that was used to how front loading washing machines work. And I think the biggest issue for consumers is making a mindset shift in what's really reasonable. Do I want the cleanest possible load of laundry every time? Or do I want it done instantaneously like a machine from 30 years ago? And the contrast really is that machine from 30 years ago, you can't buy it today. So you're already stuck. Like, Ben, when you were doing your testing, when you would take a load from the TC5 and stick it in the dryer, how much lint were you producing?
It was pretty extreme. That is something that I didn't test, quote unquote, in terms of like looking at how much lint was being produced for the identical load between a front loader and a top loader.
So break that down real quick though. Why is lint important?
So when a washing machine washes your clothes, it does it through mechanical action, agitation, the fabric rubbing against each other and around the drum, or the agitator pulling it and stretching the fabric. The more aggressive that agitation action is, and the more rough points that the clothing fibers can get caught on and break, the more lint you produce. And lint is really the product of aggressive agitation. And think about it this way. When you take an entire lint filter full of lint every time you wash your clothes, how many clothing fibers in your clothes are breaking down, and how quickly are there not really going to be many fibers left? And that's really where front loaders excel. The laundry is constantly tumbling through the wash zone and constantly turning the other direction through the wash zone. You have this very gentle circle-like motion, whether it's clockwise or counterclockwise, and the paddles are all gentle and shaped so that the clothing rolls off the paddle. It doesn't get hit by the paddle.
All right, we get the pitch. We get it.
But the end result really is that your clothes last longer and you get effective cleaning agitation without destroying your laundry and having to spend money on buying new clothes more frequently.
All right, so lint equals friction. Got it.
And that's your trade-off on why it's getting done faster, is you're beating the clothes harder on that top load than you would a front load in general. And it also depends on the style of unit that you're using, whether it's using a belt-driven high horsepower motor like, say, a Speed Queen TC5, or if you're using something that may be a little bit more gentle like a LG WT8405. I will say, thinking back, the lint on the TC5 was worse than the LG was. And if you look at Consumer Reports or New York Times wire cutters, they'll all say that the TC5 or your old style belt-driven agitators are going to be less gentle on your clothes. So there are a little bit of workarounds you can do on a top loader using a direct drive that's a little bit more gentle, or using a wash plate on your top loader that will be more gentle. But again, it's going to come at the cost of more time. And that goes for the top loader or the front loaders.
This is the other piece that people get stuck on a lot when you're looking at an impeller top-loading washing machine. You know, it looks like, oh, I got this huge drum. It's just like a front loader. I can throw everything in and go. Ben, how scientifically do you think you have to load an impeller top loader to not get an unbalance error?
I think it's less newbie friendly than an agitator is. It's less forgiving. Yet at the same time, I haven't done enough testing to really say that emphatically. But generally, when you look at the manuals for the impeller units, they'll tell you that you do have to take a little bit more time, and you generally can't pack them as full or as aggressively as you could with a unit that has an agitator. The other trade-off, though, is that they're larger tubs because you don't have that pull in the middle of them, so you can load them a little bit more. You can load them to a shorter or a more shallow depth, but there's still going to be more volume of clothes in that because, again, you're not having this giant agitator in the middle taking up 10% of the drum.
The big corkscrew right in the middle. Yeah, I mean, if there was one downside to the direct drive, it would be sometimes you get stuff snagged in the agitator with the little fins at the bottom. I mean, have we solved that in other top load washers now? Like, are you catching things?
Impeller machines, the machines that don't have a pull agitator, have solved that issue. The downside with those machines is the things that are the most likely to get caught in the agitator also don't wash well in those machines. So let's think about why you would want a machine without an agitator. The number one response from customers is, I want to be able to wash a comforter at home. Cool. That's awesome. When you put a comforter into an impeller top loader, you're pretty much guaranteeing yourself two things. One, it's not going to be able to spin out the majority of the moisture effectively, so it's going to have to spend a lot longer in the dryer than it would have otherwise with a front loader. And number two, unbalance errors are going to be even more frequent with bulky items. So the thing you have to remember is when you don't have the agitator in the center, the way you load the machine in that donut shape with the lightest stuff on the bottom, heaviest stuff on top, if you can't stick to that because you're just washing one big bulky comforter, you are going to end up in a situation where the mass of the comforter moves to one side or another of the drum, and you're going to have to fight with unbalance issues where the machine will error out, stop spinning, and you're going to have a sopping wet comforter on your hands. I get that feedback a lot from customers with impeller top loaders. There's really no good way around it as far as I've ever seen.
And the agitator keeps everything balanced?
It keeps everything balanced at the risk of shredding that comforter and having to deal with fluff inside of your washing machine clogging your drain pump.
As far as the agitators that are on the market, did they solve that today? Are there still snag points on the actual agitator?
I think LG has the best designed agitator.
Yes. So in my WT tests, the way they solved it is to have a one-piece agitator. When you have a multiple-piece agitator, there are going to be points where you can snag things underneath. Whereas with like an LG, you have essentially like an impeller on the bottom of it. It's huge, and then right up out of the middle of it is that central pull agitator, but there's no area for any of the small items to snag and get caught in.
It's all one piece of molded plastic.
Yes. The downside that people will argue against that I have seen is that it won't agitate the clothes, or the rollover action isn't as good or aggressive as the other designs, like say from a Speed Queen or the old Whirlpool two-piece agitator. And that's potentially true if not for the fact that you can just run the machine a little bit longer and get the same benefit without having the snag point.
There was a video that was part of a piece of training material that was meant to be internal distribution only that I saw from LG, gave you a pretty cool tracer breakdown of the path of a single piece of clothing in a load in a WT8400 series or 8600. It's fascinating. The laundry starts at the top, rolls down the agitator, kicks up, and almost twirled while it was in the agitation phase, hitting the drum and then coming back into that vortex. It was a really cool wash action because it's nothing like the direct drive.
Well, so the agitator of the impeller is not what cleans your clothes, right? It's the friction between your clothes inside of the washer.
Yep. That's a great point, though, because a lot of people think water cleans your clothes. Water does not clean your clothes. Water is a solvent. And the only way the solvent is really useful to you is if you have something to help emulsify the soils. And that's where detergent comes in. You know, your machine at home, your fish murdering washer, was optimized for high phosphate content detergent. Phosphates are banned. You can't buy phosphate detergent, and there's a good reason for it, because it does actually really hurt the environment, and it's almost impossible to take out of wastewater. So what modern detergent is mainly comprised of are enzymes that are designed to degrade soils, organic soils specifically, and surfactants to emulsify the end product of the enzyme's degradation. So enzymes take time and temperature to degrade soils. Friction doesn't play a role in enzymatic soil degradation. So really what you need is a washer that effectively distributes the enzyme and keeps the water at the appropriate temperature for the appropriate amount of time if you want effective stain removal of organic stains like ketchup, blood, grass stains, pretty much anything that you could soil your clothes with. You're not going to get that kind of performance out of a modern detergent with a direct drive, because it's not going to keep the water long enough in the machine, and it's not going to allow it to dissolve in the concentration where those enzymes are most effective.
And when I did my stain tests on all the different washing machines that I've had at my store, since I started doing the stain testing, so that would be a Speed Queen FF7, LG WKEX 200, which is similar to a WM 4000 or 4500, a Samsung Bespoke Ultra Fast Combo, all in wash mode, by the way. So I had those three for your front loads, and then I've had the Speed Queen TC5, the Samsung WA40 A3005, and then finally the WT 8405 consistently. And it's almost a linear performance gradient, that the longer you allow that front loader to run, especially when you opt for soaks or pre-wash, you will always get, and it was across the board, every manufacturer, every make, every model, the addition of just time would always yield a better performance on stain removal on just literally every single one of them, because you're giving it more time to simply soak the clothes, treat the clothes. And is even when I controlled for detergent variables, I use the same detergent in everything, but yet time and time again the front loaders outperformed the top loaders, but it was almost entirely based on whether or not I was running any sort of soak or treatment on them. So by the time everything was said and done, I was using half the water maybe for a much superior wash in terms of stain removal.
Did you test a direct drive?
I wish. I found out after I did all these tests, I found out we had one direct drive in our store, and my guy already sold it to someone, and I'm thinking, you turd.
Yeah. I wonder how it would match up. I don't know. I get your science and your pitch and your testing, but I don't know, man. It's hard to argue with water.
Well, think about it this way. If you soil something, and you have to hand wash it in a sink, when you hand wash it in a sink, are you drawing a huge bath of water in that sink, dumping the garment in and then just scrubbing it underneath the water? Or are you just running it on the faucet and then scrubbing it while it runs under the faucet?
I'm a terrible example for this, but if we asked my wife, she would probably have this down to a science. But I would assume it would be rinsing and soaking type action on her pre-treating that she does.
Well, in general, you would soak it, yes, and then you just kind of agitate it, and you'd be there. Even if you go back to the old washboards of the 1800s, the washboards weren't in the tubs; they were on the side of the tubs. You dip it, and then you'd agitate it dry. And with a front loader, it's kind of the same idea. You're not having to dunk it in water necessarily to get the agitation done.
That's a really interesting point.
You're just scrubbing it. The scrubbing action's what removes it. Assuming the garment's soaked. The garment needs soaked. You need to put enough water to where every part of it has water in it. But once it starts retaining water, it's not going to go away. I mean, if you have really soaked garments from the fact your spin mode doesn't work, That water doesn't like to go anywhere. It loves to stay inside. And, when I started thinking about soil removal that way, I started realizing that, that's really the optimal way of doing it because it's efficient.
It's kind of like taking a bath versus a shower.
Yep.
And just like taking a bath, how gross does the water get when you're done taking a bath?
My bath water is very clean. I'm a very clean
Yes,
person.
excellent. Good. That definitely passes the smell test.
And when it comes down to it, the efficiency of these machines matters a lot, in that front loaders will absolutely destroy top loaders in terms of water and electric efficiency. And I saw this across the board with everything I tested. Front loaders, even a Speed Queen FF7, which is going to use every bypass it can to put as much water in the tub to make sure it's as clean as possible, will still use significantly less water than a top loader will. So I have the TC5 that was $1,300, and then I have FF7 that's $2,200. In 54 minutes of running the front loader, I came out with clothes that were cleaner than running a TC5 for about 40 minutes. So 15 minutes longer, but it took only about 22 gallons of water than the TC5 on a deep fill would, which takes about 35 gallons. So about 22 gallons versus 35 gallons. And that's even for an FF7. My LGs, when I did the test, or the LGs and the Samsungs, were using even less at 15 gallons, and they were still coming out with superior stain scores across the board than what any of the Speed Queens did, but they did take longer to run. So you can even increase the amount of time of the scrubbing action and decrease the water further. And if you're going over the lifespan of a unit, over a 5, 7, or 10-year lifespan, you start seeing some massive savings over the lifespan of the appliance. And that's kind of where I looked at Speed Queens, that even if they last longer, if you're paying for water and sewer, you're going to spend way more money over, say, a 10-year span than on most Speed Queens, especially the top loaders, than you would if you were investing in a front loader, even if it's Speed Queen's own front loader.
And that's not even water. That's just cold water. Think about hot water usage. The 3 largest energy consumers in your home. Number 1 is the heating and air conditioning system. Number 2 is your water heater. And number 3 is your clothes dryer. So number 2, we're impacting because we're sucking in, let's say on a warm load, 15 gallons of hot water out of your water heater. If you've got a 50-gallon tank, that's over almost a third of it in one go. So now your water heater has to either light a gas fire and heat up another 15 gallons of water, or your electric elements are spinning the meter outside to get it hot. A front loader is unique because it can actually keep the water hot, and it has the ability to heat the water by itself. So modern front loaders, a lot of them are equipped with steam settings that allow for the machine to actually heat up the water all by itself using a fraction of the energy your home hot water heater uses. And that energy is directly input into your clothes. It doesn't have to travel through your pipes. You don't have to lose heat in the process. So it's much more efficient to have a washing machine that has the ability to warm up the water by itself. And the flip side of that is they spin faster. So the machine can physically spin about twice as fast as a top loading drum can. So that's significantly more water extraction, which is going to cut down on your use of the number 3 consumer in your home, your dryer. If you can remove more water from the clothes in the spin cycle, it needs to spend less time in the dryer.
I did head-to-head comparisons on my TC5, which I want to say the spin speed is going to be very similar to a direct drive. TC5 spins at a maximum 710 RPM. Even if you get a modern, like super nice LG with a stator, it's about 900 RPM. But even a Speed Queen FF7, which is not the fastest front loader on the market, it spins at 1200 RPM. And what I found out was if you take a 12-pound load of clothes, I took identical clothes on the FF7 front loader versus the TC5 top loader. On a 12-pound load, I was pulling out between 1.5 and 2 pounds of water more on the front loader. I could take I was getting about 20.5 pounds wet from the TC5 when I was pulling it out of the unit. And I could take that 20.5 pounds of wet clothes, throw it in the FF7, and once it got done spinning, which actually was it was a 10-minute spin versus like 12 with the top loader. In 10 minutes, I was pulling out 18 to 18.5 pounds of clothes afterwards. So I was saving between, again, 1.5 to 2 pounds of water. And if you look at the math, it's a very set number. For every 1 pound of water that you have to take out of your clothes, it's about 350 watts of electricity.
So, like, let's put this into perspective. I just looked up what the average price of a kilowatt in Texas is, 15.6 cents.
I did some energy and efficiency analysis for a project that I'm working on, and one of the biggest standouts was we were comparing Maytag commercial top loader to an ASCO front loader. And what is the 5-year life cycle cost between the two washing machines? So there were 800 machines in question in this particular example. And after you paid for each machine, you were looking at probably I think it was an $880 savings per machine after you covered the price difference between $1,000 machine and a $2,100 machine.
And that's exactly what I found out when I looked at a TC5 versus an FF7. The TC5's $1,300, the FF7 is $2,200. But the TC5 costs, even without the hot water factored in, just the cold water factored in, I was looking at about 80 cents per load of clothes on the TC5, and the FF7 was 70 cents per load of clothes, even after factoring in a 20-year lifespan on the TC5 and a 17.5-year lifespan on the FF7.
Yeah. I don't know. There's some valid points. The biggest part there was the price savings that you were just describing. Makes a lot of sense over the lifespan. That's an interesting point. What other points? What other variables here are there on laundry? What are we not thinking about on washers?
I get a lot of people that have complained to me over the years about, well, I don't want a front loader because they smell bad. And I'm going to qualify that statement because people are going to get upset. You can make a modern top loader moldy and disgusting just as easily as you can make a front loader moldy and disgusting. It has nothing to do with how the machine operates and how it washes your clothes. It has everything to do with what you put into the machine. It has everything to do with overusing detergent and fabric softener. If you overuse those products in machines with low water consumption, it will never be able to rinse them away. And so what you'll end up with is this film of disgusting chemically modified animal fat on the outer drum of your washing machine that just supports the growth of mold like nothing else. If you use way too much detergent and softener consistently, or just detergent, and you use way too much of it consistently, you will develop a mold problem, and you will develop a really gross smelling washing machine.
All right, so we had some pretty good points on this subject. We've got a water thing to consider, the amount of water we consume, but also the temperature of the water that comes into the washing machine. We had electrical consumption, agitation speed, or agitation amount was one of them too. How much the machine actually agitates, the volume of water that the machine outputs into the environment. But yeah, I think there's some pretty solid arguments all the way across the board. So yeah, thanks guys. Any other closing remarks on your picks and why?
I mean, my pick is always going to be front load laundry. I think with the advancements that have been made in automatic dispensing features to dispense the appropriate amount of detergent to control for what we exactly just talked about, letting the machine decide how much detergent to use and taking it out of the customer's mind is really a huge benefit. But even still, just from a pure convenience standpoint, I don't want to have to think about loading my washing machine. I would just like to load it, start it, and walk away from it and not think about it until it's done. I can do that with a front loader. I can't do that with a top loader. I have to put mental energy into loading it correctly so that it can finish the cycle without terminating early because it's off balance. I don't have to worry about loading a blanket correctly around a pole agitator so it doesn't get torn apart by the agitation action. I don't have to think about separating my clothes by fabric weight to make sure that I've appropriately loaded the machine so that it effectively agitates. Like, there's so many considerations in how you correctly use a modern top loader. The more convenient option is actually the front loader, because you can just throw it all in and hit start and walk away, and it'll do the good job 9 times out of 10.
Convenience factor, another point. All right, so Ben, any other closing remarks?
I think the issue is we always look at top loaders and front loaders in a vacuum. You know, you get super used and locked into the top loader, and then maybe you try the front loader once and you're not very sure about it. But having, you know, used all of them in six or seven different styles extensively in the past 3 months, you know, when you really do it side by side, you start seeing those advantages that Matt talks about. And it's kind of hard to where, you know, I got to tell you these things, but the only time you really start seeing it is when you get your water bill at the end of the month, or you get your electric bill and you say, I didn't think it'd be that low. Or I switched to a front loader because of the smells. Why is my water bill so high? And then now you know.
Yeah. No, they're good points, and it's interesting to see you guys actually agree on a result. But it is hard to argue against my direct drive washer. I'm going to pass that thing down to my kids' kids. It's going to be, they're going to name a city after that thing someday. It's going to live to be so old, so it's going to be hard to see that go.
Well, go get your trisodium phosphate and go revel in your fish murdering washing machine.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, thanks, guys.
Nice.
This has been another episode of Appliances Unboxed, and we will see you on the next one.